Black Wall Street Chronicles, Episode 3. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to my podcast, listen to my video essays. A couple of days ago, we had a horrible tragedy. 50 people was massacred in New Zealand, excuse me. It was because of a white supremacist. This white supremacist had a President Trump manifesto where he gave he talked about how Candace Owens and PewDiePie inspired him. I think this person was just using it to troll the internet. He had every intentions to go in there and shoot the people on his own. He was just looking for people as an scapegoat to his sick way of thinking. Yeah, the white supremacist way of thinking is really psychotic, and we have to figure out a way to deal with people who have an evil mentality towards other people of other races. Black Wall Street Chronicles, today we will talk about this. I'm going to read some articles that basically give a idea of what's going on in New Zealand right now, what they're doing to prevent the massacre and prevent other evil individuals to commit acts of mass violence and mass terrorism. Okay, I'm going to read an article from USA Today from a Mr. John Bacon. New Zealand Prime Minister vowed Monday to unveil gun law changes within a week and called on gun owners to surrender their firearms to police after last week's shooting rampage that left 50 people dead. Within 10 days of this horrific act of terrorism, we will have announced reform which I believe will make our community safer. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said. Ardern promised a review into security agencies after the mosque shootings, the New Zealand Herald reported. New Zealand Police Commissioner Mike Bush said that his officers would willingly accept guns from anyone who wanted to get rid of them. He suggested that people alert police ahead of time given the current situation. Ardern said that she applauded people who handed in their weapons and encouraged more to do so. Some gun owners took to social media to share stories of giving up their semi-automatic rifles. John Hart, a farmer and a Green Party member from Walter, said on Twitter he had owned a gun for 31 years. On the farm, they are a useful tool in some circumstances, but in my convenience doesn't outweigh the risk of misuse, Hart tweeted. We don't need these in our country. The New Zealand auction website TradeMe said it was pulling semi-automatic weapons from its sites. TradeMe CEO John McDonnell had previously argued that his site was better venue for dealing in weapons than the more nefarious alternatives. But it is a clear public sentiment has changed in the relation to semi-automatic weapons, and we acknowledge that, which is why we are putting this ban in place, McDonnell said. Gun City and Christchurch gun shops said Monday that it sold 4 guns to the accused shooter online since November 2017. We detected nothing extraordinary about the license holder. Store owner David Triple said 2 of the guns used were semi-automatic weapons that had been modified. Monday, the man accused in the shooting, Brenton Tarrant, fired his lawyer and wants to represent himself at trial, the court-appointed lawyer said. Richard Peters said the accused killer expressed no condolences or regret in the brief time they spent together. But it did seem apparent to me that he seemed quite clear and lucid, whereas this may seem like an irrational behavior, Peter told the Herald. He didn't appear to me like to be facing any challenges or mental impairment other than holding fairly extreme views. Interesting. So according to this article, this man wants to represent himself, and he's showing this no remorse. This dude is really a He's not insane. He's really is a terrible, evil human being. He's white supremacist trash, and he needs to be put away for the rest of his life or executed. With these in the United States of America, what they like to do is they like to place people in a psych ward and they like to protect them. This is interesting. This is what we're going to do, okay? I'm going to read another. We're going to do. We're going to, because people may not understand what white supremacy actually is, or for some reason, because there's people out here may not get it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read something else from my notes to basically explain what white supremacy is. Give me one more. Okay, what I'm going to read is an expert from white supremacist culture. And the person that wrote this article, his name is Tima Okun. Alright. This is a list of characteristics of white supremacist culture that show up in our organizations. Culture is powerful precisely because it is so present and at the same time so very difficult to name or identify. The characteristics listed below are damaging because they are used as norms and standards without being proactively named or chosen by the group. They are damaging because they promote white supremacist thinking. Because we all live in white supremacy culture, these characteristics shows up in the attitudes and the behaviors of all of us, people of color and white people. Therefore, these attitudes and behaviors can show up in any group or organization, whether it be white-led or predominantly white people, or people of color-led or predominantly people of color. Now, the first characteristic of white supremacy that they say here is perfectionism. Little appreciation expressed among people for the work that others are doing. Appreciating that is expressed usually directed to those who get most of the credit anyway. More common is to point out either how the person or work is inadequate, or even more common, to talk to others about the inadequacies of a person or their work without ever talking directly to them. Mistakes are seen as personal. They reflect badly on the person making them, as opposed to being seen for what they are, mistakes. Making a mistake is confused with being a mistake. Doing wrong with being wrong. Little time or energy or money put into reflection or identify lessons learned that can improve practice. In other words, little or no learning from mistakes. Wow, okay. Tendencies to identify what's wrong, little ability to identify, name, and appreciate what's right. So that's the first characteristic of white supremacy. They want you to be a perfectionist, and if you don't follow what they feel is being perfection, they think that you're less than a person. Okay. Now, the second characteristic of white supremacy is a sense of urgency. Continued sense of urgency that makes it difficult to take time to be inclusive. Encourage democratic or thoughtful decision making, to think long term and consider consequences. Yes, because according to the other people that I listen to, like a Tariq Nasheed or Professor Black Truth, they're saying that white supremacy thinks on a form of survival. So if you're thinking on a form of survival, you would have a sense of urgency. Let's read more into this. Frequently results in sacrificing potential allies for a quick or highly visible results. For example, sacrifice interests of communities of color in order to win victories for white people, seen as default or norm community. Okay, so the white supremacists, with their mentality of a sense of urgency, have no problem sacrificing others for their goal. Interesting. Reinforced by funding proposals which promise too much work for too little money, and by funders who expect too much for too little. Interesting. All right. Now the third is defensiveness. Yes, the third characteristic of white supremacy is defensiveness. The organizational structure is set up and much energy spent trying to prevent abuse and protect power as it exists, rather than to facilitate the best out of each person or to clarify who has power and how they are expected to use it. Because of either or thinking, criticism of those with power is viewed as threatening and inappropriate or rude. Okay. People respond to new or challenging ideas with defensiveness, making it very difficult to raise these ideas. A lot of energy in the organization is spent trying to make sure that all of the people's feelings are getting hurt or walking around defensive people. White people spend energy defending against charges of racism instead of examining how racism might be actually happening. Interesting. So let's analyze this third characteristic of white supremacy. So it says here that if you criticize a person in a position of power, they make this seem like that's rude. You're not supposed to question the person that's in power. And they're so busy defending racism and defending to say that they are not racist that they have no interest in to find out if racism is actually happening. Okay. Now, here's the fourth characteristic of white supremacy. Fourth characteristic of white supremacy is quantity over quality. Okay. All resources or organizations are directed towards producing measurable goals. These that can be measured are more highly valued than the things that cannot. For example, numbers of people attending a meeting, newsletter circulation, money spent are more valued than the quality of relationships, democratic decision making, and the ability to constructively deal with conflict. Okay, so it says here they're more interested in gathering numbers instead of they think that gathering numbers and having more people attend to a meeting is better than having decision making and to constructively deal with conduct. That's interesting. Little or no value attached to the process. If it can't be measured, it has no value. Okay, they only care about the numbers. Discomfort with emotions and feelings. So if you show any emotions and any feelings, they don't like that either. No understanding that there is a conflict between content, the agenda of the meeting, or process. People's need to be heard or engaged. Process will prevail. For example, you may get through the agenda, but you haven't paid the attention to the people's need to be heard. The decision made at the meeting are undermined and are disregarded. Okay. Interesting. So they don't care about emotions or feelings. They care about getting numbers. They have no understand the conflict. These guys are so more interested in achieving numbers and achieving power instead of making constructive decision making. It's interesting. Now the fifth one is worship of the written word. If it's not in a memo, it doesn't exist. The organization does not take into account or value other ways in which the information gets shared. Those with strong documentation and writing skills are more highly valued, even in organizations where ability to relate them to others is key to the mission. Okay, everything has to be written down. It's not in a memo, it doesn't exist. I'm not sure about this one because these white supremacists are seen to be very interested in the internet. So why would they care about a memo being written down? I don't get that one. That's interesting. Only one right way. The belief that there is one right way to do things, and once people are introduced to the right way, they will see the light and adopt it. When they do not adapt to change, then something is wrong with them. The other, those not changing, not with us, those who know the right way. Similar to missionary who does not see value in the culture of others, communities, sees value in their beliefs and about what is good. Yeah, these people are people are talking about the religion of white supremacy on it. Yeah. It's the same concept. There's only one right way, and if you don't think our way, we have to get rid of you. We have to cut you out. Paternalism. This is the, let's see. I'm on, I've already 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the 7th way of thinking of a white supremacist. Paternalism. Decision making is clear to those with power and unclear to those without it. Those with power think they are capable of making decisions for and in the interests of those with power. Those with power often don't think it is important or necessary to understand the viewpoint or experience of those for whom they are making decisions. Those without power understand that they do not have it and understand who does make what decisions, and yet they are completely familiar with the impact of those decisions on them. Paternalism. Let's read into this again, because I think I don't even understand what this is saying. Okay, paternal instinct, paternal, that's parent. Okay, I get it. This is basically saying, and I'm going to repeat some of the talking points on the paternalism. They keep talking about power. Those with power, those without power understand they do not have it, and they understand who does. Yeah. Paternalism basically, and to summarize it, is that they are obsessed with power. They think that they are in power, and they think that they're in control. And okay. Now the 8th form of white supremacy way of thinking is either or thinking. Things are either good, bad, right, and wrong with us or against us. Closely linked to perfectionism and making it difficult to learn from mistakes or accommodate conflict. No sense that things can be both and. Results in trying to simplify complex things. For example, believing that poverty is simply a result of lack of education. Creates conflict and increased sense of urgency as people feel that they have to make decisions to do either this or that, with no time of encouragement to consider alternative, particularly those which may require more time or more resources. Often used by those with a clear agenda or goal to push those who are still thinking and reflecting to make a choice between A and B without acknowledging a need for time and creativity to come up with more options. Interesting. The either or mentality. You either go my way or the highway. Okay. Now, We're going to take a break, and we're going to talk about more of the characteristics of white supremacy culture. Thank you.
From the middle of 42nd, I'm blessing another banger by Psychotic. I'm on and I'm wrecking the Punisher beast. This is capital punishment, punished be speaking. Been punished, you cast and make examples out you rappers. Bronx bomber from the city where the greats are from. Chris Rivers, OP Milo Reigns is from. Cuban Link, Busy Being and Remy Martin. Man, that verse on any up is fucking. I'll forever love my city. Bright lights and big dreams. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar bills on the rails. Take it back to 93 instead of 90 for that L. Hip-hop, rap caused the panic. Salute to Queensbridge, the home of Illmatic. And the infamous, can't forget son, Derek Jeter showed that number 2 was number 1. Flip the switch like when Angie Mall went to power. Flex beefing with Hov, I'm feeling sour. It's still New York City, no effing cowards. Brooklyn, where the people yelling yawa. Fabulous Joel Ortiz, man, them boys are ether. Rest in peace, the birthplace of Aaliyah. High haters, even at the haters loving me, no BK. The birthplace of David Blaine, yo. Papoose drops charades. Meanwhile, the second Sunday in June is the PR parade. Floating through the city, all the people getting lit. Can't forget about Harlem. Shout outs to the dips. Children of the corn showed unity. Now we bumping that diplomatic immunity. Greatness is earned and never borrowed. You sucker MCs won't last in the Apollo. Heavy, Planet Rock, Africa, Bambaataa, Zulu Nation, and rock steady. Hardcore, jumping on city trains, graffitied up, B Street. No need to fight, bring out the cardboards. Break dancing, I break them, they ain't advancing. I'm crazy laced with the prancing, get my B-boys dancing. Pardon me bargaining, but the art of me's expanding. Get late to rest, cause I make the best while I'm breaking necks. This ain't a test, I shatter MCs, prepare your tape decks. For that street flow, New York City, all the homies still doing chin ups on the street post. Y'all seen that Fat Joe made them lean back. We started local, became big and went global. Hip hop gave us a voice and we became vocal. No matter what, I will never front. I may be Jersey, but I'll never forget where I came from. New York, right.
Yeah, we back. Now, hot ass song for Chris Rivers, man. Bronx in the house, man. Damn, that kid can spit. Anyway, back to business. There's a lot of information on the different types of mentality that white supremacists have, and we're not even done yet. So we're almost finished. And I'm also going to talk about the Nazi agenda and where the concept of neo-Nazis come from, okay? So, the next mentality of the white supremacist is fear of open conflict. Alright? People who have power are scared to express conflict and try to ignore it or run from it. When someone raises an issue that causes discomfort, the response is to blame the person for raising the issue rather than to look at the issue which is actually causing the problem. They emphasize on being polite, equating the raising of difficult issues with being impolite, rude, or out of line. There's a comic I can relate to this because it goes hand in hand with political correctness. Like, every time you raise something that's controversial racially, there always be like, you shouldn't say that, this impolite, you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. That's actually problematic, you see. Okay. Role-play ways to handle conflict before conflict happens. Discriminating between being polite and raising hard issues. Don't require those who raise hard issues to raise them in acceptable ways, especially if you're using the ways in which issues are raised as an excuse not to address those issues. Once a conflict is resolved, take an opportunity to revisit and see how it might have been handled differently. Individualism. Individual is another mentality of the white supremacists. Little experience or comfort working as a part of a team. People in the organization believe that they are responsible for solving problems alone. Accountability, if any, goes up and down, not sideways to peers of those organization is set up to serve. That's interesting. Lack of accountability is actually a mentality of a white supremacist, huh? And early in the article it says that many people of color actually have this mentality too. This is very interesting. Desire for individual recognition or credit. Okay. You working as a team, but you still want individual recognition and you don't want to acknowledge the work of others. Okay. Leads to isolation. Competition more highly valued than the cooperation, and where cooperation is valued. Little time or resources devoted to developing skills on how to cooperate. Creates a lack of accountability as the organization values those who can get things done on their own without needing supervision of guidance. Okay. That's interesting. So, if you working for a company and you have the mentality, if you can't work with a team and you don't take accountability for your own actions, you actually have a mentality of a white. You actually have one of the main mentalities of a white supremacist. That's interesting. Don't worry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the website of the person who's handing out all of the information. I'm going to put it on the bottom of the YouTube page once I post it up. I'm the only one mentality. Okay. Connected to individualism. The belief that something is going to get done right, I have to do it. Little no ability to delegate work to others. That's interesting. Progress is bigger, more. Observing how we define success. Success is always bigger, more. Develops the ability to serve more people, regardless of how well they're serving them. Gives no value, not even to negative value, to its cost. For example, increase accountability to funders as the budget grows. Ways in which we serve may be exploited, excluded, and undisturbed as we focus on how many we are serving instead of quality of service or values created by the ways in which we serve. They're more concerned about bigger and getting bigger and add more staffs and bigger, and don't even care about the cost. That's interesting. Objectivity. The belief that there is such a thing as being objective or neutral. The belief that emotions are inherently destructive, irrational, and should play a role in decision making or group process. Invalidating people who show emotion, requiring people to think that they are linear, fashion, or ignoring or invalidating those who think in other ways. Impatience with any thinking that does not appear logical. That's interesting because in dealing with white people and just in America culture in general, people think that African Americans actually think in a monolith. We all think in same. We all have a linear way of thinking. And any black person that says anything different, like for example, say a black person says that's supporting Trump. all of those black people, I don't like President Trump. Let's get that clear. But let's say a black person wants to be a black Republican, and you have a whole bunch of people on the internet, along with white people, that's saying that that black person is a coon, that black person is a sellout. That's actually not good, because you're practicing white supremacy, and vice versa. If you think that black people have a linear way of thinking a monolith, all think the same, that's actually very racist. Okay. Now, another mentality of a white supremacist is the right to comfort. They believe that those with power have a right to be emotional and psychologically comforted, scapegoating those who cause discomfort, equating individual acts of unfairness against white people with systematic racism, which daily targets people of color. That's interesting. So, you feel that you have to make the people in power comfortable, and you use scapegoats with anybody that makes the people in power uncomfortable. You use scapegoats to basically protect them, and you equate individual acts of unfairness against white people with systematic racism, which daily targets people of color. Yeah, you create false equivalency between the strife of white people between systematic racism. Okay, I get it. Now, it says in the article, one of the purposes of listing characteristics of white supremacist culture is to point out how organizations which unconsciously use these characteristics as their norms and standards make it difficult, if not impossible, to open the door to other cultural norms and standards. As a result, many of our organizations, while saying we want to be multicultural, really only allow other people and cultures to come in if they adapt or conform to already existing cultural norms. Being able to identify and name the cultural norms and standards you want is a first step to making room for a truly multicultural organization. This is an interesting article. This article is written by a woman by the name of Tima Okun, and the website is www.dismantlingracism.org. Okay, I'm gonna put the link of this article under my YouTube page, okay, which is Pain 308 TV, but I will post it on my Facebook page, and I will also post it on Facebook and Twitter and all this other various websites that I am dealing with, social networking websites. Okay, so what we're going to do is going to take a quick break, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about neo-Nazism and where exactly it started from. Thank you very much.
Your reign on the top is short like leprechauns as I crush all you whack MCs and rapper thugs. That was refreshing. Yeah. You can catch me in the Mecca, looking so mean. Blue Yankee fitted while I'm chilling with my team. Madison Square on the sideline screaming. Coach put me in and I'm on, now I'm beasting. Hands in the air, I wanna see you keep them high. Put your hands in the air, I wanna see you keep them high. Put your hands in the air, I wanna see you keep them high. Oh yeah. Yo, you can catch me on the front line, looking like a sergeant. BX, all the way to Jersey, will be marching. SB, Cool D, Mellow, bring the squad in. Call me Ray Moses with the flow that I be parting. Pardon me while I shoot for the art when a nigga draws. I'm Ray Charles, I sharp when a nigga saw. Come on, dog, you can see a nigga paw. Feeling like fuck the world, my emotions too raw. My name rings bells, I'm kicking down your door. Think you super fly, I put you in disguise like a luchador. So international. international, my thoughts are on tour. Shorty loves the swag, gotta slurp it through the super straw. This shit was hot about a week ago. I'm AC mixed with Zach, you still screeching though. You can hate, you still peeping though. I be riding through my old hood, but now it's time to get it in. So yeah, I'ma do me. Heard they wanted me to win, so yeah, I'ma do me. Heard you thought that I was slacking, well it's time to do me. Shorty wants that satisfaction, well it's time to do me. Put your hands in the air, I wanna see you keep them high. Put your hands in the air, I wanna see you keep them high. Put your hands in the air, I wanna see you keep them high. Put your hands in the air, I wanna see you keep them high. Yeah, fly nigga catch me with a shorty. I'm from the Bronx, when my nigga still poppin' 40. Puerto Rican call me Barty. Shorty called the dick fat is too gaudy. Yeah, this game I'm about to kick got me feeling like some salt that your bitch about to lick. Like some alcohol, I'm about to liquor in this bitch. Then I'm out to the store to cop me a soda and a chick gon' stick grinding. I bet them red lights make you stop. It's my time, boy. I've been ticking like a watch. I'ma push the pin. At the end, it's all about respect. I'm ahead of minds, how I'm standing on top of next. Wow. Pure bars if you rewind it. Said I'm ahead of mine, I guess I have to remind it. My bad, you had a declining. You wasn't all that, it's time to fall back. Now it's time to get it in, so yeah, I'ma do me. Heard they wanted me to win, so yeah, I'ma do me. Heard you thought that I was slacking, well it's time to do me. Shorty wants that satisfaction, well it's time to do me. Put your hands in the air, I wanna see you keep them high. Put your hands in the air, I wanna see you keep them high. Put your hands in the air, I wanna see you keep them high. Put your hands in the air, I wanna see you keep them high. Who else? This shit is poppin'. All you other rappers know your shit is flopping. Hollybugs, this shit is knocking. They sending shots, I'ma tumble with the blocking. I'm not the type to talk about I pump lead or this money. I'm trying to dump them up like bunk beds. I'm tired of living life broke, fuck that. This money I must stash like it's under the nose. Hold up. Ray getting funky on them. Let's rock out Bundy on them, funny on them. I go bananas, I'm a monkey on them. I'm addicted to rap. Guess what? I'm a junkie on them. I'm causing riots when the rally starts. And one when I cross lines like tally marks. Ray Pearson, I ain't with the slacking. You can call this satisfaction. Now it's time to get it in, so yeah, I'ma do me. Heard they wanted me to win, so yeah, I'ma do me. Heard you thought that I was slacking, well it's time to do me. Shorty wants that satisfaction, well it's time to do me. Put your hands in the air, I wanna see you keep them high. Put your hands in the air, I wanna see you keep them high. Put your hands in the air, I wanna see you keep them high. Put your hands in the air, I wanna see you keep them high. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ray Pearson, welcome. Who else? I'm here. Frank. Yeah. Get him now, Boogie.
Goddamn, Boogie, where'd you find this?
Street Chronicles. This is Black Wall Street Chronicles. Welcome back. Earlier, we already talked about the ideology of white supremacists in a corporation, and I'm gonna put the link of an article that I was reading from so you can get more information on that. But because of the massacre of New Zealand, there might be people out here that may not understand what neo-Nazism is and where it comes from. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to read an article, and I'm going to read where neo-Nazism comes from, so you can basically understand what you're dealing with it when you're dealing with these races. Neo-Nazism consists of post-World War II militant social or political movements seeking to revive and implement the ideology of Nazism. Neo-Nazis seek to employ their ideology to promote hatred and attack minorities, or in some cases to create a fascist political state. It is a global phenomenon which organized representation in many countries and international networks. It borrows elements from the Nazi doctrine, including ultranationalism, racism, xenophobia, ableism, homophobia, anti-Romanism, anti-Semitism, anti-communism, and initiating the Fourth Reich. Holocaust denial is a common feature, as in incorporation of Nazi symbols and admiration of Adolf Hitler. In some European and Latin American countries, law prohibited the expressions of pro-Nazi, racist, anti-Semitic, or homophobic views. Many Nazi-related symbols are banned in European countries, especially Germany, in an effort to curtail neo-Nazism. I'm going to talk about the Hyperborean racial doctrine. Neo-Nazi writers have possessed a spiritual Neo-Nazi writers have written a doctrine of race which moves beyond the primary Darwinism-inspired materialistic scientific racism popular mainly in the Anglosphere during the 20th century. Figures influential in the development of neo-Nazi racism, such as Miguel Serrano and Julius Ova, writers who are described by critics of Nazism such as the Southern Poverty Law Center as influential within what it represents as parts of the bizarre fringes of National Socialism past and present, claim that the Hyperborean ancestors of the Aryans were in the distant past far higher beings than in current state, having suffered from the evolution due to mixing with the Terulic peoples, suppose the creation of the Demiurge. Within this theory, that if the Aryans are the return to the golden age of the distant past, then they need to awaken the memory of their blood, as an extraterrestrial origin of the Hyperboreans is often claimed. These theories draw influence for... I don't understand how to pronounce this word. Gnosticos. Gnosticism. The heck is Gnosticism? Oh, this is very deep, guys. Hold on. I lost my place. These guys think they're extraterrestrial? It says here these dudes think they're aliens. Extraterrestrial origin of the Hyperboreans is often claimed. These theories draw influence from Gnosticism and Tantrism, building of the work of the Anaerube, which in this racist theory Jews are held up as the antithesis of nobility, purity, and beauty. These guys think they're aliens. What, they think they're reptiles now? Neo-Nazi generally aligns itself with a blood and soul variation environmentalism, which has themes in common with deep ecologically the organic movement and animal protectionism. These tendencies, sometimes called eco-fascism, which is represented in the German National Socialism by Richard Walter Dahr, who was the Reichsmaster of Flood from 1933 to 1942. Reich Minister of Food. Reich Minister of Food. He was the one that was responsible of organizing the food sources of Germany during the Third Reich. Okay. Agnostic European movements. Outside of Germany and other countries which were involved with the Axis powers and had their own native ultra-nationalistic movements, which sometimes collaborated with the Third Reich but were not technically German-style National Socialists. Revivalist and non-Stalinist movements have emerged in post-war period, which, as neo-Nazism has done in Germany, seek to rehabilitate their various loosely associated ideologies. These movements include neo-fascists and post-fascists in Italy. Vikhites, Pintinists, and National Europeans in France, Ulici sympathizers in Croatia, Neo-Chinks in Serbia, Iron Guard revisionalists in Romania, Hungarians and Hordians in Hungary, Banderalists in the Ukraine, which had a complicated relationship with the Axis powers, and others. Following the last stand of Italian fascism with the German-supported Italian Social Republic, those towards the end of the Second World War, those elements within Italian society which remained loyal to the legacy of Benito Mussolini and fascism, especially veterans of the National Republican Army, rejecting both the Catholic and communist alternatives prominent in mainstream Italian policies, funded the Italian social movement in 1946 under Giorgio Almirante. These MSI was regarded as the successor of the National Fascist Party and the Republican Fascist Party. The motto of the party was "Not Reputed, Not Restore," indicating a more moderate parliamentary democratic neo-fascism which did not heap scorn on the recent past. Italian society did not undergo a process as extensive as the post-world de-Zenification campaign it occupied in Germany, partially due to the Cold War and the Western Allies not wanting Italy to move towards the Warsaw Pact, which is not an impossibility at the time. The Italian social movement held a similar position in Italian politics that the National Democratic Party in Germany did in Germany. Careful enough to stay within the laws of the new democratic state, but still clearly identified with the Axis legacy. During the 1950s, the MSI moved closer to bourgeoisie conservative politics on the domestic front, which led to radical views, founding hardline splinter groups such as the Pinto Ranto Ordine Novo and the Stefano del Clark Algrute Nazionale. These organizations were influenced by the Estroritism of Julius Evola and considered the Waffen SS and Romanian leader under Corneliu Zeller Cardinal as a reference moving beyond Italian fascism. They were implemented in paramilitary attacks during the late 1960s to the early 1980s, such as the Piazza Fontana bombing. Deli Chisé have even assisted Giulio Borghese in a failed 1997 coup attempt known as the Gallup Borghese, which attempted to reinstate a fascist state in Italy. During the 1980s and 1990s, the Italian social movement under leadership of Giovanni Fini moved closer to conservative politics, adopting a post-fascist position. This was opposed in a fascist element under Rocio, who created the Fama Tricolore in 1995. The party was dissolved of Fini in 1995, who replaced it with the National Alliance. This party rapidly moved away from any connection to the fascist past towards the center-right in coalition with Silvio Berlusconi's Forza Italia. The two parties merged in 2009 to become the People Freedom. Alessia Mussolini, troubled by Fini's explicit combination of her grandfather, broke with the AN to find social action. Aside from Famine Tricolore, the other extant neo-fascist groups in Italy are Forza Nova, the Fronte Nazionale movement, Idea Socialist. Sorry, that's a phone call. And the Cultural Casapound Project. In terms of current size, they are mostly negligible. I didn't know that there wasn't a damn Nazi fascist movement in Europe that was so strong. This is the late 2000s. This is still going on. White supremacy is really international, man. Well, anyway, this was a lot of information. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place the links to all of this information because, to be honest, a lot of the words was very hard to pronounce. I'm going to be honest. This is above my vocabulary, my pay grade. So it's okay. So what we'll do is see you guys next week, where we'll talk about the psychological conditions of our community. Thank you very much, and you have a pleasant night. God bless.